Welcome to another edition of the Craig Smarter Podcast. I'm Phil DiMartino, along here with Marcy Lusky and Jacob Steiner. Hello, how are you guys doing today?
Good, how are you?
I am doing great. Thank you guys for joining me.
Welcome.
Of course.
Today, we are going to talk all about the creator economy. And really, you can use different terms for it. You can use influencers, you can use creators, you can use any number of different terms, but we all know what we're talking about. We're talking about people with big followings on the internet who make a splash and make you notice things that you might not otherwise notice. Specifically, I want to draw attention to the marketing plan that the NBA has around All-Star Weekend and how that might tie into some of the things you do in your own work, whether it's at a school or a corporate job or anything else. And it goes back to a lot of what we always talk about here with our clients and internally, and that's the idea of second-level networks. So let's get into it. First and foremost, there's a report that the NBA is engaging with upwards of 200, all-star content creators for All-Star Weekend. Jake, you know who some of these folks are. I'm too old for this, so I don't know who any of these people are. Let's dive in. Marisa, what would be the reason for doing this? The NBA has tons of traditional media coverage. They've got big TV deals. They've got, a huge reach. What is the point? Why do this?
Yeah, I think that it's important to think about how to get other people involved and other audiences to watch and to pay attention. And I think they're specifically targeting a younger audience and trying to get their eyes on the broadcast. And you mentioned the idea of hitting second level networks. And that's kind of what we think about in our content too, is how do we, get our clients' video in front of other people, in front of other audiences. And so that's when we start incorporating students, the younger folk that can help spread videos further and kind of share to their own networks and things like that. So I think that their idea here is to show maybe, All-Star Weekend in a different angle, different light, show it through the eyes of some creators, things like that, but also kind of get the attention of maybe younger audiences or different audiences in places that they weren't getting it before.
I think what's really interesting to me about this conversation, it ties back to the broader approach for sports and for live events more generally. It goes back to a comment that the commissioner of the NBA made before the season when he was asked the question about people being able to access games as they're, fragmented across more and more streaming services. So it's Prime, it's Peacock, it's, all NBA TV if you're at a network, all these different streaming services. And his comment was something along the lines of the NBA is a highlights league. We don't necessarily even expect people to watch full games, which is a bananas thing to say when you think about pro sports. But it kind of ties into this idea, doesn't it, Jake, of the idea of people highlighting the NBA experience and moments as opposed to even worrying about the 82-game regular season schedule.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I like to be an avid fan of my New York Knicks. I like to watch games where I can. I don't get to, a lot of full games anymore. It's hard to, find that time in, but most of the NBA content that I'm, absorbing is all coming from, shorts and other, quick hitting, Anthony Edwards dunks over this guy, Jalen Brunson hits the game-winning shot. I'm not getting the content, the way that it initially, when the NBA, became a broadcasted sport. So it's very interesting how they've adapted. I think they're incredibly smart for identifying the fact that a lot of the younger generation is watching it primarily in this fast-hitting highlight short. I think that's incredibly smart, one, for them to think about it that way. And, for them to bring in content creators and say, hey, these are the people who are also getting that short videos and getting retention for their short content, to partner with them, incredibly smart, incredibly aware of what their audience is. And I think that's really important, is to understand, where your content is going to be, watched and who your audience is.
Yeah, and I think the understanding the mindset of the commissioner and what he believes his league to be really is an important part of this, because these random influencers and content creators who have these big audiences who maybe aren't NBA fans, the goal is not necessarily to say, Marissa, you follow this content creator, you're going to see a clip that they produced from All-Star Weekend and suddenly go watch, the Celtics, 82 games of the year. It's that, you're going to be tangentially interested in the NBA and maybe you'll buy a t-shirt, right? Maybe
you're going to get, at least you're going to start conversations about what happened All-Star Weekend. There's going to be at least some attention, even if it's not watching the game. Somebody else is talking about your event or your, clips or things like that. It's just like the brand awareness piece of it.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so interesting is the point is brand awareness, less so than it is. I think the traditional mindset would be, well, we're going to get all these creators to create content or these celebrities to do endorsements so that we can drive viewership for the All-Star game. That's not really, I don't think, the play here. Sure, they're going to be happy if the ratings are good, but really it's the play is how many eyeballs can we get on All-Star weekend as an event or on the NBA as an event? And I think the measurables around, the brand of the NBA are different than how many millions of people tune in to watch a game. And this is a really good way to get, you think about the drama and the storylines and the people and the stars and the silly moments. That's what's going to drive overall kind of awareness around the league, right?
Mm-hmm. I feel like I pay attention as somebody that doesn't really watch the NBA. Like I pay attention to certain things based on when I'm scrolling through Twitter and I'm like, oh, a million people are talking about this like really funny thing that happened or this one interaction that happened. And it's those little clips that you're talking about, Jake, that's like, maybe it's not even necessarily moments of a game. Maybe it's moments, on the court side or something like that where it's something notable, but like that's how I pay attention is, tangentially, as your point was.
Yeah, the marketing team must love, this time of the year. We just kind of passed that trade, your trade block there. But, how many posts did you see, scrolling through about, is this player, not even did they get traded? Is this player going here? Are they going here? Are they going here? And it's just, every single thing starts a conversation, like you were saying, which is so important, and grabs, eyes and gets people thinking. Ultimately, that's what you're going for. You're getting people thinking.
And I think what's really interesting about, marketing around a pro sports league is like, how do you get, new fans? Baseball has struggled with this forever. And they talk about adjusting the product and making the game different and all of that. But, the reality is like, no matter what the NBA does for coverage of All-Star Weekend, like I'm an NBA fan, I'm a Knicks fan, I'm going to watch the Knicks game before the break and after the break. They're not worried about me, right? They are thinking about, activating new fans. And, it's not going to start at 100%. They're not all of a sudden going to be, this person who's never watched an NBA game is not going to watch, who's the guy who's in every Super Bowl commercial, the influencer who I have no idea what he
Drewski?
That's the what?
Oh, yeah. I was like, what?
No idea why he's famous, but apparently he's famous.
He's a comedian, I
Can someone
think.
tell me?
He's a comedian, internet personality. And this is...
Yeah. But internet personalities, like that's a term that you wouldn't really hear.
I've never felt older.
Yeah.
Drewski's
not that young.
No, just because like I see this guy and he's everywhere, and I'm like, I missed a major cultural.
You missed it last year. He was even NBA was pushing him huge last year. They've identified him as someone who gets, a certain demographic to watch, and they've used him in marketing campaigns. And he's very loud. He's he is funny, but that's his gimmick.
Yeah.
I don't really know too much beyond that. And I've watched a lot of his content.
Well, so there's two different conversations here. Who is Drewski and why? But then also, the really interesting part about that is he's one of those who's actually crossed over from being leveraged as a creator so that people can access his network to being in traditional media. He's in commercials and everything else. So it's like, oh, he's a big enough draw that when he's in a commercial, that matters. It's an interesting point. But what I was going to say is that, if there's someone who's a follower of Drewski and they've never watched an NBA game and he's one of the influencers there, well, they might not immediately make the jump from not watching games to, screaming at Karl Anthony Towns, when he's committing an offensive foul in the fourth quarter like I am, or celebrating when he hits a three. But they might start following the NBA on social or following along and seeing some of these storylines, and the algorithm is going to, work the way that it does and start feeding them more and more. And it's a slow burn, and over time, they become a fan. And that's the new way to kind of creep up on people, is to give them content that they will engage with, and then the algorithm is going to say, you might like more NBA, and feed them more. So that slow burn is really what we're looking at, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool because there was another technique used where you were seeing, a lot of athletes and NBA players specifically, go to the creators. So we were seeing a lot of, people, Kai Cenat. Is that a name we know?
I know these names. He just does like a talk show from his bedroom, right?
I was going to bring up him and Speed.
Speed, that's the other one I see everywhere. And I see these things. I'm like, I know.
Speed was in a Super Bowl commercial this year.
He was, but
he wasn't.
He partnered with Kevin Durant to make some videos, and those became super popular. So this approach to have content creators go to the All-Star game and promote it that way, I think it's just another form of what they've been doing, and that is how can we get the internet talking about the NBA, and how can we continue that conversation, maybe even in the off season? How do we continue that fire under our audience, so they're still locked into that piece of content?
There's a couple more parts of this that I want to get to. First is the value of it, right? So the NBA talked about it like, oh, it's not necessarily a pay-to-play thing, but there's tons of paid opportunities. Really, the NBA ends up lucking out on this because there's so many other brands attached to it, and those are the ones, in a lot of cases, who end up paying the influencers to be a part of it. So it's, oh, I saw I don't know if it's some dude is going to sleep over at the Dome and like stay there overnight. And like, I'm sure some company, Intuit, maybe I think it's the Intuit Dome, is going to pay that person to sleep over there. Or maybe some other company is going to, probably Sealy, is going to send a mattress, something dumb, right? But the NBA is not, in most cases, like directly paying these people. They're getting someone else to do that work for them. What is it worth to reach a billion, if however many followers Drewski has, it must be a billion for him to be in all these different ads. What's it worth? Like, I guess that's the question. Like, these people have big marketing budgets. Is it worth more to do that than it is to invest in an ad? Like, where does the line come in? Like, how do you decide what it's worth?
Yeah, I think it's people kind of almost relearning how to do something different, or like learning how to do things in a different way. It's, it's not the traditional ads anymore. It's the how can we get people engaged on social? I was even thinking that I think there was a Mr. Beast Salesforce Slack commercial ad where there was this whole social activation side of things,
and like a paid content.
It even went over my head, but I guess the point there is if you're going to make an ad, right, if you're going to use some kind of traditional media, it's even going beyond that. If you're, you could do both or skip that and just do the influencer content, whatever. But the point being is that you have to figure out how to engage people in a different way beyond that traditional advertising. So I think people are just kind of learning how to operate in this new influencer life, I guess.
And then, Jake, you mentioned all the off-court stuff, and I kind of want to end here. I think you see it in every sport, but the sports that end up being the most popular seem to be the ones where there's the most drama, off the court, and people and the stars are really, doing crazy stuff. I think about in the NFL, like one of the biggest stories around the Super Bowl was Cardi B being involved with, Stephon Diggs, right? That's a story that draws in non-football fans to think about it, for better or worse. No such thing as bad press. Is this a good thing for the NBA? Like, does this help the NBA grow as a sports league, or is it just, more eyeballs and it doesn't actually, encourage positive fandom?
I think any press is good press. I think that's a huge thing to keep in mind of whatever piece of content you put out, good or bad, you're getting eyes. Think about how many millions of dollars people used to spend to get 10 million eyes from the Super Bowl. What about just a very quick side comment, from, one of these social media people, like you said, yelling at Karl Anthony Towns that, gets the 10 million views and there was no money spent for the NBA. There's so many more eyes, connected to your phone, connected to social medias that the money is, it's not, you can't even comprehend how much money you would have to pay to get the eyes that you're getting with social media. And so, anything is a good thing for the NBA. So they've played it incredibly smart. They know they have a youthful audience. They know that they continue to grow their audience. You talked about baseball. Baseball has struggled with this. I had the chance to go to a Savannah Banana game. Very different, style of baseball, if you even want to call it that. But the whole purpose of that league is to generate that social content, to generate the socialized, And I think the NBA has done a very good job of learning their audience and adapting how they market themselves, at all levels, on all platforms. So this is a good thing. This is absolutely what the NBA wanted.
I think there's also a point to be made, and this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but about the NBA specifically, I feel like the attention is a lot more on the individual athletes, more so than teams. And so compared to, a football team where there's a million guys on a team in helmets, you don't have that connection with them in the same way you do an NBA star kind of thing.
Visible stars.
There's also less of them. So I think that specifically talking about the NBA, this is a good approach to have maybe influencers tied with specific players and things like that, because I feel like a lot of young fans specifically are paying attention to individual players and less so teams, especially because there's so much movement and people that stay on teams for as long. So that's a whole other point. But I think there is something to the fact that you're seeing these people as individuals and individual athletes rather than teams. And so I think there's a different angle to it when you're trying to market that.
I will also add, the NBA is so international,
really good point,
and this is a thing, they are pushing now with the All-Star. This is USA versus the world.
Yeah.
They're very smart. They're very strategic about how they've, gone about marketing their brand. And I just wanted to add that point that this is international, and they've done a fantastic job of pushing, international creators to also get involved, knowing that they can bring that back to their audience and their native, language, They've done a fantastic job marketing, the All-Star game. It's something we've all, the All-Star game itself, I feel like it's lost steam in every sport.
Yeah.
I think people have really, started tuning away. It seems like the athletes have, kind of fallen off. So this is just a very smart way of getting, more attention back to the All-Star game a little bit, and then, to the NBA as a whole.
Yeah, and I think your point about it, the game itself not mattering, like this is a prime example of it. It's like you have the biggest stars and all the personalities that people know. The game does not matter. So don't try to get people to care about the game. Try to get people to care about all the other stuff and have fun with it. And I think, it's a good strategy.
I did want to make one more point about kind of tying this back to some of the work that we've seen and the work that we're doing. I maybe make it a little bit more relevant. I don't know. Just kidding. Anyways, so there's a university that we're working with that we're doing a broadcast for, and I think it's super interesting the way that they want to approach this year's Giving Day is that they want to really focus on the creators. They even have a new major at the university that's just for like the creator economy and getting, students to learn about how to make content for themselves and brand themselves and things like that. And so I think the way that we've seen it, I talked about, almost learning, like unlearning traditional media and kind of learning this new wave of creating content. I think it's super interesting that we're going to go into this broadcast for this Giving Day, and it's going to be like pretty much solely focused on student content creators and, seeing the university through their eyes. And I think there's something to say about, having that different perspective that maybe, the audience doesn't normally get. And so I think it's very interesting that kind of to connect it to all the stuff that we're talking about with the NBA, it's just leaning into the content creator idea and kind of moving into that way of thinking.
Thank you for bringing it back to something that normal people can actually use as opposed to just the NBA. You mentioned the authenticity there and the quality of content that you get from working with these creators. Jake, can you speak for a second about the benefit of not just getting that high quality content that shows it in a different light, but the reach that you get from going through people who are not university or college or brand channels, but individual channels with their own following. And by the way, it doesn't have to be Drewski. It can be someone with a couple thousand followers who's a student or an employee or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think this ties, well into what we were saying this whole time is that, any eyes you're able to attract, to whatever cause, to whatever marketing campaign you're, whatever it may be, any eyes are good eyes. And the better that you do at, retaining those eyes, the more interest you'll garner. So, get the eyes, learn how to retain the eyes, and you'll actually, you can be incredibly successful. So it's very smart to leverage the content creators and the content creation space because it's so massive. It's so endless, continues to grow. And it doesn't seem like it's something that will slow down, anytime soon. So there's no bad time to invest in that right now.
And we've worked with a lot of clients where we create for example, like a main video for our campaign or something like that. But then we create other little bits of content out of that might be for the students to post or for different individuals from the organization to post. And it's just a different way to get in front of different eyes and kind of tie back to the same main point or the same university or the same organization. It's just about getting in front of different people that you might not have gotten in front of before. To your point about the normal university channels, people are going to follow certain student organizations more, like their friends are going to see it. And so it's all about whose eyes you want, but it's, that's how you get more eyes, is to kind of leverage other people's audiences, whether it's a student or somebody that's, a big alum or a notable name or something like that.
We've done podcasts specifically to this topic, and we've done some blogs about media days and second level networks and all of that. And I think, we can direct people there. But just to end on this point, Marisa, what is the value in terms of building trust and engagement by using this type of really engaging content, directly from the students as opposed to from the high level university accounts, the all seeing, all knowing university? Why is it important for an organization to partner with these people from a trust and authenticity standpoint?
I think it just makes it more genuine when it's, we can sit somebody down for an interview and use it wherever, but I think if they're also willing to share that or share at least a piece of it, it's like, yes, I'm endorsing this thing, or I talked about this stuff, I believe in it, whatever it might be. I think there's just a different angle where it feels more real when it's coming from that specific person that's posting it, and it kind of puts like a face to the name and kind of humanizes it a little bit more than if, you know, just a general organization is posting it or a university. I think there's just an authenticity factor there that you wouldn't normally get.
Yeah, and even if your numbers aren't, you know, as big as a Drewski or a Jesser, who I definitely know, or Giannis or Karl Anthony Towns, there's value in getting other people to tell your story and be your evangelist. So do it. Well, this has been the latest edition of the Create Smarter podcast. I'm Phil with Marisa and Jake. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.